I'm back from Italy and here to give you all of the tea on our 10-day trip from my friend Nora's magical castle wedding to the Tuscan road trip we embarked on the following week. Oh my gosh, we ate, we drank, we laughed, we got very lost, and so much more. So I'm excited to share and catch up with you today. Before we jump in, I did just want to say two quick things. Number one, just as a heads up, I'm having one of those days, okay? I had a little bit of a crash out this morning, just feeling the imposter syndrome, feeling the struggle that I guess every creative kind of goes through. And because I'm recording this episode the day before it goes live, we're very much in real time here. So I just wanted to be transparent about that. Honestly, it's very Hannah Montana. Everybody has those days type of energy where I know that what I do is good and I know that I produce quality content, but just a little bit of comparison and imposter syndrome and intrusive thoughts. I was trying to say intrusive and syndrome, I think, in the same sentence. All of those things, as you can see, are mixing together and have infiltrated me today. I've kind of let it get to me a bit, but I want to power through. I want to sit here and have a fun, chatty episode with you guys and tell you all about our trip, which really was amazing. The second thing I wanted to say before we jump in, which I think is really important to acknowledge, is because I pre recorded last week's episode, I haven't had a chance to say anything or comment on what has been going on in our country. I was trying as much as possible to enjoy my time in Europe and stay offline, but news of the ice raids in Los Angeles and everything that's been going on in our country at large obviously did reach me. And I just wanted to take a moment to say I did not vote for this current administration. I'm extremely frustrated, disappointed, and frankly overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So if you are also feeling a little helpless this week, I totally see you and I hear you. We are in the same boat. The America that I love and that I would like to live in can't exist without immigrants. It can't exist without women. It can't exist without the LGBTQ plus community. And to see the current administration so severely undermining and attempting to dismantle all of these communities is incredibly frustrating and heartbreaking. So if you guys have any resources to share with me, please feel free to reach out. If you know of anything else that we can be doing to exercise our First Amendment rights, which last I checked are not going anywhere, or just kind of come together and seek comfort, please do let me know. Otherwise, I just wanted to acknowledge what's going on and say that I'm thinking of everyone out there. And I hope you know that Create and Consume and all of my social platforms are a place that is open and welcome to everyone. And if you're listening to this episode way in the future somehow, that's just a little news update of what's been going on here in June 2025. So thanks for bearing with me, and let me do a little create and consume before we get into the full topic and itinerary. So as far as what I've been creating this past week, I have been taking total advantage of having access to such beautiful landscapes, imagery. Just the content opportunities wrote themselves in Italy. Okay, guys, it was extremely easy to whip out my phone every 2 seconds and want to document the experience while also trying to balance living in the moment. So, needless to say, there's a lot of fun content up on Instagram and TikTok right now from my trip. I did also shoot a vlog that will hopefully be up in the next few days, I want to say. I don't have an exact date just because I'm about to have a bit of a busy weekend ahead. But one thing that I thought would be fun to lean into that isn't really my typical content was kind of like quick hits, like life in Europe or like visiting Europe type content. And one video that I made was being like, oh, it's only a 10-minute walk. Let's get walking. And then realizing how many stairs there are in Italy. My step count and the stairs that we climbed last week were very high. And then the other one was like trying and failing to order in Italian. So basically, like placing your entire order in English and then ending with a very emphatic, like, grazie at the end. And Andrew actually made a little cameo in that reel. And then he also stepped in front of the camera for a different reason that I'll get to later in the episode. I will leave links to some of that content in the show notes in case you'd like to go check it out. And then I did also lend my camera to someone who attended Nora's wedding so that they could record the ceremony. They didn't have like an official videographer, and they were going to have someone record the ceremony. And I was like, would you guys like to borrow, my Sony camera for optimal video and audio quality, hopefully? So I was able to stitch all the ceremony footage together and upload that to an unlisted YouTube video just so that Nora and her family can have access to it if they want to watch back their ceremony. And then I also made like a fun little quick edit that was maybe like 4 minutes just from clips from the day and put some music in and stuff. So you'll see a little bit of that footage in my vlog, but I was not trying to like make Nora's wedding about me by any means. I more so just know how much it means to me to be able to look back on our wedding videos and content. So wanted to just give them a little bit of something extra to remember the day by, especially like I said, given that they didn't actually have a videographer there that day. They did have photographers though, and I'm super excited to see how all of the photos turned out. And then as far as what I'm consuming this week, I'm honestly just been catching up on YouTube. And can I just say, shout out YouTube Premium, because I was able to download a bunch of content to watch on the plane the same way that you can with like Netflix, Amazon Prime. If you have YouTube Premium, you can download content and watch it offline. That was a big game changer because it just felt like time was flying on the flight home. And I really needed the distraction on the flight home. I'll tell you why later in the episode. Some creators I've been watching lately are Samantha Randazzo. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. She is doing a moving series. She's moving in with her boyfriend and has been documenting the process. I finished up Alana Davison's Everyday May videos. I didn't watch all of them. I decided to pick and choose because there were 30 of them, or 31 actually. So I didn't get a chance to make it through all of them, but she's been back in my rotation lately and I honestly missed her. It feels like catching up with an old friend, and I've been really enjoying her videos lately too. And then Amber Burns, who's one of my favorite YouTubers as well, just posted a week in my life, and she is so close to 10,000 subscribers, you guys. So if you watch my vlogs and like them, you would definitely like hers as well. I will link her channel below. Okay, and after a good bit of rambling on my part, let's get into the main topic of today's episode, recapping the Italy trip. So obviously the reason we booked this trip in the first place is because Nora, who is one of my very best friends in the whole world, is getting married or has just gotten married because she is married. And actually, she was married a year before this wedding too, because they legally got married last year. And then this was their reception slash official celebration with friends and family all together. I feel like that's becoming very much the standard these days, whether or not you're having like a destination wedding or a wedding abroad. So we have known about Nora's wedding for over a year. So like this trip was always in the calendar. The question was really just like, what do we do after? Like, should we try to go to another country that we've never been to before? Do we want to stick around Italy in the area that the wedding was? And we decided to do the latter. So Nora's wedding took place at this incredibly beautiful venue called Castello di Magrano in Gubbio, Italy. And Gubbio is a town in, I guess, central eastern Italy, if you want to call it that. It's like about 2.5 hours of a drive from Florence. And then this venue was maybe another 25 minutes from the main town of Gubbio. And as you could probably guess from the name, Castello di Magrano, it was a castle. It was a castle. She got married at a castle. And not only that, but we got to stay there for 3 nights, which was crazy. We left here on Thursday, June 5th. We actually had a flight from Newark to Brussels, which is funny because we were in Brussels last summer. If you guys listened to my Eras Tour recap episode, I went to see the Eras Tour with Andrew in Amsterdam. And then we actually took the train to Brussels and just did like 24 hours in Brussels because we wanted to try to add in another country while we were in Europe last summer. So we got back to the Brussels airport. We made our connection to Florence. I thought that was making a connection by the skin of my teeth, but I'm not even going to recount that for you because there's a much more interesting story when we connected home through Frankfurt. So we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, we arrived in Florence. We picked up a rental car. Andrew had to get his, I guess it's like an international driving permit, by the way. So if you're thinking about doing any kind of Tuscan road trip, be sure to look into whether or not your license will transfer and work in Italy. And this was actually relatively easy compared to like when we rented a car in New Zealand because we were able to rent an automatic car. You know, the driver's seat is on the left side. They drive on the right side of the road there. The only real challenge was just like navigating the street signs in another language and dealing with all of the roundabouts. Italy loves a roundabout, let me tell you. So we made it to the town of Gubbio just fine, but then from getting there to the castle was where we started to get lost. And I saw some people say that you can download certain map apps to have offline that will work offline. totally something we could have looked into and should have looked into because we lost cell signal at the top of this mountain trying to find this castle. We basically pulled into just like this poor Italian family's driveway, and like first, this grandmother came out, and then the mother came out, and then the daughter came out. No one spoke a lick of English. We didn't really speak a lick of Italian except for me saying mi dispiace, like I don't mean to be intruding on your land here. We're just looking for a castle if you have maybe seen one. So that was all very dramatic and whatnot, but we were ultimately able to find it. What ended up happening was Nora actually just like had shared her location with me and said basically just drive towards my dot. And that honestly really helped. We finally arrived Friday afternoon at the venue, and Nora showed us to our room. We were able to like drop our bags off and everything. We got changed, and then we had not really like a rehearsal dinner per se, but more so just like a game night at the castle, which was great. So they had charcuterie boards, they had lots of snacks and things like that, and it was so nice to meet all of her and her husband's different friends from all different walks of their life, like people I know they know from Switzerland, and people I know. And I should back up and just say Nora is originally from Geneva, Switzerland, and her husband Jaime is from Spain. So, in some ways, yes, this was a destination wedding in that they are both from Europe but not from Italy. But it was less of a destination wedding than, if you were born and raised in the US and you wanted to get married in Italy. So I feel like if you can drive to your wedding, it's a little bit less of a destination. But it was a destination for us, and one that I was not complaining about in any way because it was so stunningly beautiful. We participated in game night and then ultimately went to bed kind of on the early side just because the wedding was the next day. So Andrew, as per usual, was like doing a run in the morning, and then he was able to relax with some of the other like husbands in the wedding party by the pool while all the girls were getting ready. So I basically got up and got dressed and started to head up to the bridal suite where everyone was going to get ready all together. Some of the girls chose to go into the town of Gubbio to do a blowout for their hair. For me, if there's one thing I can do, it is actually my hair. I am very confident in my hair skills at this point. I'm sure you can't tell today because my hair is just in a frantic ponytail, but like I said, I had a bit of a crash out this morning, so we got done with the makeup and we just stopped there. We like made half of the effort. But anyway, I knew already what I wanted to do with my hair. I just knew I wanted to pull it back because I knew it was going to be a hot day. I think it got to like the mid or upper 80s, and as I said, we were staying in a castle, and you know what most castles don't have, unfortunately, is air conditioning. I mean, it was pretty cool overall just because of all the stone and the fact that that in itself can keep the heat out. But in the bridal suite with all the heat tools and the proximity and everything, it is a warm situation. So I ended up pulling my hair back into a ponytail. I curled what was left in the ponytail, and then I did the little wrap around where you take a piece of hair and you wrap it around so it looks like just the hair is holding up the ponytail and that there's not even really an elastic. For that, I used these little tiny plastic clear elastics that you can get in like 1,000 pack from Amazon. I can link the exact ones that I used in the show notes. And I was so thrilled that the curling iron that I purchased in Florence actually 10 years ago when I was visiting my friends who were studying abroad there still worked in 2025. So it already had the Euro plug. I didn't have to worry about the converters and things like that. I know that's an issue people run into, especially with like the Dyson Airwrap and tools like that with the voltage not matching up. So the fact that I had this European curling iron came in clutch, and I basically had already done a little bit of a trial run with my hair and makeup the previous week, so I knew exactly which products I was bringing, what blush I was using, and all of those details, and I'm really happy with how my makeup turned out. And then from there, I was also kind of, helping and consulting with some of the other girls and their hair and makeup too, doing a bit of curls, sharing setting spray and things like that. Honestly, the one thing I probably should have brought, but I just never think of because I typically have more dry skin, is those blotting papers. And I think like Biore makes them. I think Neutrogena makes them. If you know, you know, they definitely would have come in handy. For my makeup, I basically just tried to recreate my own wedding makeup. And this is actually something I want to talk about too. So for hair and makeup, that was pretty much like standard what I would do for any other wedding. What was not something that I would do at any other wedding was what I wore. So Nora asked all of the bridesmaids to wear white because she actually wore black. I actually ended up re-wearing my rehearsal dinner dress from my wedding to Nora's wedding, and I'm so happy I got a second use out of this dress. I had purchased it, I think, through Revolve. The brand is Elliot, which is a very popular bridal brand, I would say, if you're looking online for things. And it is so drapey and pretty. The only thing I was worried about was needing to steam it. And actually, one of the bridesmaids' husbands figured out how to take the one iron that was in the castle and kind of like turn it into a steamer. So I think my dress would have been okay. Like, obviously, it was not my day. I was not the center of attention if it hadn't been steamed, but the fact that it was able to get steamed was awesome. The big crisis of the day, because I feel like there is always at least one, was that we were zipping up Nora in her dress and the zipper like got stuck slash broke. And this is where Nora was like, no, I specifically picked my bridesmaids because I know at least one of you has been to sewing camp before, and I know the other one of you is a literal surgeon because Nora just graduated from Emory med school. So they know how to suit or something, okay? They know how to stitch it in, get it together. So luckily, crisis was averted. Everything was fine with the dress, but it was a little scary there for a minute. It's like, what's the last thing you want to happen on your wedding day? Your zipper breaking, of course. The wedding was slightly on the smaller side, 50 guests in total. So it was obviously an honor to be invited and also to be asked to be a bridesmaid. I mean, for context, Nora was a bridesmaid in my wedding as well. She is a friend from Barnard. I should add too, I didn't even like put any context in here because I just assume like you guys know this all already because we're friends. So anyway, Nora and I went to college together. We were in the same sorority, and that's how we initially met. And she was just one of those friends who like I clicked with from the jump, and I always knew was going to be a friend of mine. We all walked out together and we sat for the ceremony, and the ceremony was really cool. So the bulk of it was in English, but given that this was kind of an intersection of a lot of different groups of friends from all different places, the ceremony had a couple of different parts to it. So there was a reading in Spanish, and then it was translated into English for all the non Spanish speakers. There was a reading in French, and then that was translated as well. And then one of Nora's friends from high school, which she went to high school in Kathmandu, Nepal, ended up doing a little speech for her as well. And the ceremony ended with the traditional Scottish, it's called like a hand fasting ceremony, where they actually take a large piece of ribbon and tie it around like Nora and her husband's hand. And then when they pull their hands away, there is a knot left behind. So that's the origin of the saying, tying of the knot. And it was just beautiful. Nora's dad officiated the ceremony. Her mom walked her down the aisle. I teared up at the vows. It was just so beautiful. Then from there, we did a little appetizer hour where there was Prosecco, there was bruschetta, there was prosciutto, like just all the good foods. And I was camped out at the table next to the prosciutto and the olives. That's exactly where I wanted to be. Then we made our way to our tables for dinner, and dinner was great. It was family style. They served 3 different pastas, and you could like ask for more pasta. You could be like, this one that you just gave me, I'm going to need you to bring me more of that right now, which honestly, never been to a wedding where I could do that. So that was amazing. And there was also pizza. The wine was flowing. It was just so much fun. Then they did some speeches, and the bride and groom also played the shoe game because everyone is so spread out throughout the world who was attending the wedding. Nora didn't do like a traditional bridal shower or anything along those lines. So we did get to play the shoe game with them where it's like who's more likely to, and then, they hold up whichever shoe they think it is. So that was really fun too. And then I think the best part of this castle venue, honestly, was the fact that the dancing started kind of later, like after dinner. And I feel like usually at weddings, when the dancing is starting before dinner, it's more so because there's like a timeline. Like I know for our wedding venue, I believe we had to be fully done by 10:30, and then they needed 90 minutes to break down so they could be out by midnight. Like that was just the contract of our venue. No such restrictions at a castle, let me tell you, because the dancing started after dinner. And the last clip I have on my phone videos of us dancing is timestamped at 1:52 a.m. So we were literally dancing until like 2 in the morning because we had the phone hookup, we had it blasting on the speakers, and we were in the middle of nowhere. Like we could not possibly disturb a neighbor because there was no one around for miles. So that was incredibly fun. I didn't stay awake for this part, but I did hear that some people jumped in at the pool later, which, at the height of the ceremony when it was like 86 degrees, I could kind of see that. By that point, I think it had dropped into the 60s. So I heard that was kind of a chilly experience for people. And I'm glad I did not partake in that. And then on Sunday, we just hung out at the venue, which was great. We basically had like a pool party day where we drank, the leftover drinks, and we made another cheese board and had like a whole brunch situation at the castle, which was fun too. And then Andrew and I did pop into town to just check it out a little more because we had kind of just quickly passed through on our way in. Walking around Gubbio, Andrew said it best, was literally like being on set of Game of Thrones. It was so cool. We ended up grabbing a little aperitivo just at one of the first restaurants that we stumbled across, and then we got some gelato and drove back for our last night at the castle. And Monday morning, it was time to head out, so said goodbye to Nora and her family, and then we started the drive from the Umbria region, which is where Gubbio is, back into the Tuscany region, which is where we flew into in Florence and where we spent the rest of our trip. I will be doing a full blog post for Keep Calm and Chiffon that has like the official itinerary of our trip. So that will be in more traditional travel blog style. For today, I kind of just wanted to talk you through some of the highlights of the trip and do it in more of the like gossipy catching up on FaceTime type of way, because I feel like there are so many fun little details that I would say like over the phone to a friend that I wouldn't necessarily put in like the proper travel guide, if that makes sense. This is something I'm still working on ever since I've introduced the podcast as another platform, by the way, is just like, what do I talk about where? Because in some ways I want to talk about everything on the podcast, on the blog, and also over on YouTube. But I also want there to be a differentiation of content on all of those platforms. So you can go to different platforms for different content. And if you happen to follow me on all three, which by the way, huge thank you if you do, that is a lot of me that you are consuming each week, but I really, really appreciate it, so that it doesn't become too repetitive or like something you've already heard. And I give a lot of credit to Andrew for planning out the where to go and for doing a lot of the navigation on this Tuscan road trip, because the countryside of Tuscany is beautiful and driving through that part of it is relatively easy, I would say. But once you actually have these different pit stops, all of these different like medieval hilltop towns and things like that, it was not easy to navigate and figure out where to park, if the car can fit through the tiny streets, and what all the different Italian road signs mean, because some of them look like they mean one thing but actually mean another thing. So Andrew had done a lot of research already about that in terms of parking lots. What do the signs mean? How do you pay for gas? Like, how does that all work as you're driving through? So a lot of credit to him. And he's the one who kind of picked out these different stopping points. I had said that I definitely wanted to spend some time in Florence and more than one day in Siena, because in the past I've just done a day trip to Siena and I wanted to spend a little bit more time there if possible. But everything else was really his decision. So he kind of figured out the like, where are we going? And then once we got there, I kind of took over for the what to do during the day. So very good teamwork, if you ask me. Okay, and please bear with me through my pronunciations, but we first drove from Gubbio to the town of Montepulciano. This was one of these beautiful historical hilltop towns. A lot of them are really well preserved, which was cool to see. And we got off and basically found a parking lot like at the bottom of the hill or the edge of the gate. You'll see, like, if you try to put in a restaurant on your GPS for one of these, restaurants within the town walls or like the castle walls almost for some of them, you're not going to be able to actually like drive up to them and park there. In fact, a lot of them are zones of limited traffic, or ZTLs, I think it is in Italy. I think it's Zona Traffica Limita or something like that, ZTL. So you don't want to be driving through at the wrong time or going the wrong way. We actually did see someone get, pulled over by the polizia because they were driving in an area where they were not supposed to be driving. Only select vehicles with certain permits and things like that can do so. So for the three towns that I'm about to mention now, we either needed like specific parking permits, or you had to know just to like park outside of the towns and then walk up to them. So for Montepulciano, we actually had to park basically like at the bottom of a hill and kind of walk up to the hill. But honestly, it was better that way to not have the car be too chaotic. And it was just so stunningly beautiful. So we ended up grabbing lunch at a place called Cafe Poliziano. And when we first walked in, it just looked like such a classic cafe, like wood on the walls. They had a whole collection of espresso cups behind like a glass cabinet, the little bistro tables, and they actually had a view because we were up so high on the hilltop. They did have a couple of seats on a balcony, which by the time we got there, they weren't available, but we got to peek out and see just views, just sprawling views of Tuscany and how absolutely beautiful it was. And I got a glass of Chianti Classico and a pasta, which was so good. And another fun thing to note about Montepulciano is they shot the scene from Twilight New Moon where Edward is about to like show himself to the Volturi in this town. So we actually passed by like a little poster where they showed them filming there, and it was like behind the scenes, this is where Twilight was shot, and it was so funny. And it was just super fun to bop around. This one and the other two towns that I'm going to tell you about that we went to, this was like peak local shopping, I would say, where there were shops where you could buy artwork, there were shops where you could buy leather goods, there were shops where you could buy food. And honestly, I was aiming to save some of our shopping and like souvenir gathering towards the end of our trip in Siena and Florence. I kind of wish that I had picked up things at some of these smaller towns just because I feel like the shops were more accessible and right there, and they weren't as like crowded or overwhelming as some of the other shops later on. And there were, just beautiful pastas, little things of olive oil, all of the things that you would possibly want. From there, we drove, I think, 45 minutes or an hour to Montalcino, and Montalcino is a place that I'm so happy we got to visit. One thing to note about Montepulciano and Montalcino are that I believe most people try to visit them almost as like day trips from Florence or from Siena. However, we arrived in Montalcino and we were actually planning to stay there for the night, which I'm so happy that we did. So the first thing that we actually had to do was drive through, again, this like limited traffic zone. And thank God Andrew looked this up beforehand. He has so much more foresight about the logistics of this stuff than I do. Like, this never would have occurred to me in a million years. But essentially, our B&B gave us this like temporary parking permit where we could like weave through these tiny streets, literally like going up into the fortress walls of like a castle that were basically built to surround and protect these hilltop towns, many of which were like military fortresses originally. So we're like weaving through these little streets with like the fortress walls on either side, zipping around. It literally felt like we were in I don't know, like Mario Kart or something, but like Mario Kart Renaissance Edition. It was not for the faint of heart, let me tell you. I don't know if I could have done it personally. So he somehow navigates us like through this little maze. Like, he literally just put the gate into the GPS and already knew from memory of like what he had looked up, where we needed to go. And then he pulls up like right by this church basically, and then like points down the road and is like, that's our B&B down there. And I'm like, oh, down all of the 8,000 stairs. Perfect. And the stairs were just unavoidable in Italy. Definitely wanted to mention that. But basically, we had this temporary parking permit where we were able to unload our bags and go to the B&B. The B&B that we stayed at was called Le Scalette de Piazza, and it was a self check-in property. So there was basically like a little lockbox where we could grab our key. So with the temporary parking permit, we dragged our bags down the stairs. We got the temporary key. We let ourselves into the room, dropped the bags off, locked the room, locked the front door, and then went to go move the car. And we were able to move the car to a parking lot right outside of the castle gates, I guess, if you want to call them that. And what was cool about that was we were able to park there for free because it was kind of like down and out of the way. If you wanted more primo parking, you would have to pay for it inside. So this ended up working out fine because we were able to then also get the car, bring the car around in the morning and load our bags in again. So once we like knew the system and we knew what the deal was, it was all good to go. And it was also really nice because by the time we got there, I believe most of the like day tours for the day had kind of popped out by then. I assume most people probably get there at like 10 in the morning and are gone by maybe 3 or something if they were coming from Siena or Florence. So the fact that we arrived to do our check-in around 2 meant that by the time we kind of got out on the streets at 3 to 4-ish, it was honestly pretty open. It kind of felt like we had the town to ourselves, which was a very unexpected and cool experience. So at this point, it is still Monday in our trip, but I'm thinking to myself, we're in Tuscany. We should do a wine tasting. And a lot of the wine bars in the area, which are called enotecas, basically offer different wine tastings. So we literally just stumbled upon this place, Enoteca de Piazza. I believe that's wine bar in the piazza, the translation. Some of these things are very obvious, and some of them I'm like, couldn't tell you what that means. It honestly felt like they had this endless menu. Like they definitely had over 100 different wines that you could choose from. And we ended up like picking a tasting that was kind of a preset tasting that also came with a small aperitivo appetizer board. So it came with some meats, cheeses, things like that, which was great. So we did the tasting and then we actually picked our favorite wine from the tasting and were able to purchase a bottle of it to share. And this is like the Italian pacing and leisure of the day, which was just like, okay, we tried our different wines and now we're just going to sit here and like for a very long time, drink and talk and hang out. And it was really a lot of fun. Now, one thing to note also is that the wine bars and those kind of little places were open, but most actual restaurants in Italy will typically be open for lunch between like 12 and 2 or 12 and 2:30. Then they will close for the afternoon and most don't reopen until 7. So that is something we ran into when we arrived in Gubbio on Friday because we got to the town of Gubbio at I want to say 2:30, so there ended up only being one restaurant that was open. It was a great restaurant. We got pizza there, which was good, but we would have had more options had we been like an hour earlier for lunch. So I think that's helpful just to keep in mind. So by the time we were bopping around and ready to have dinner, it was about 7 p.m. And honestly, we already had kind of filled up from the wine and also the aperitivo board that we had in the afternoon. So we were really just looking for a dinner spot where we could get at that point like a bit of protein, like a secondi plate and maybe an appetizer or something, kind of like a late dinner. Now, really, we didn't make any reservations for dinners or lunches or anything on this trip. And here's why, because in the past, in my experience traveling to Italy, the best places are just like the ones that you stumble upon. And I have very rarely had that fail me. I feel like I have always just stumbled into a great place. So we really didn't make any reservations. And the only time where this failed us was actually in Montalcino because we looked up this restaurant on Google Maps called Re de Macchia and it looked so good. It had good reviews. Like someone called the food annoyingly good. And that to me is like my perfect catnip. Like I need to know what that food tastes like then, if that's how you describe it. And we thought we would be fine because it was a Monday, but that was the one place where we walked in and they said, "Do you have a reservation?" And we said, "No." And they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We're booked tonight." So we ended up pivoting and getting dinner at a spot called Il Moro. Absolutely loved this place. It basically felt like being at your family's restaurant while they were cooking you dinner. First of all, the view that I had was obviously of Andrew, but then behind him was the clock tower and then like the cascading, here's the hilltop town and then here's the cliffs and then like out there is just the beautiful countryside. It was kind of crazy. I mean, I enjoy the view always of sitting across from Andrew at a restaurant, but like to have that behind him too, I was like, this kind of looks like a postcard. So that was cool. I'll definitely share that in the Italy vlog so you guys can see. And for this, again, we just ended up ordering some bruschetta and a secondi dish. So I ordered some grilled sausage, Andrew ordered some grilled chicken. It was delicious. And I did get like just one glass of wine at dinner because we were already pretty wined out at that point. And it's still, I don't know what I ordered, but they sent over more than one glass. I think this was one of the like cheapest meals of the entire trip, which was amazing. And they also brought us out biscotti and limoncello shots, which I did not take for the record. I am not a fan of limoncello. It is like way, 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 way too sweet for me. But I would absolutely recommend trying to stay here for dinner one night if you are doing this trip and definitely go to that restaurant because they are very friendly there. The next morning, we were able to have breakfast at the B&B. Breakfast was included and we were going to check out and then drive over to Siena where we were going to be staying for the next 3 days. And I was talking to the woman who worked at the B&B in Montalcino and she was like, "Are you going to San Gimignano?" And I said, "I feel like I have heard that name." And I think Andrew actually originally had it on our list, but we weren't sure if we would have time to stop there or not. And she was like, "You should definitely stop there." I said, "Okay, ma'am, I will blindly follow you. That sounds great. I will reroute our day and we will go there. And this actually ended up being the perfect day and time to do this because, again, for our hotel in Siena, I don't think we would have been able to check in until 3 p.m. And we were checking out at around 10 a.m. from Montalcino anyway. So it was perfect to just kind of go visit a third town and be able to pop in like that. Ideally, you should try to hit this one in the time between Siena and Florence if you're doing a trip like this, because what ended up happening was we kind of drove past Siena a little bit to get there and then had to double back. But again, because we needed to fill a couple of hours, it ended up working out perfectly for us. This one, the parking was something that we didn't really get a chance to look up beforehand, so we did end up parking in a lot at the top of the hill, but right outside of, once again, these kind of like fortress walls. I don't know how Andrew fit in this spot, you guys. Like, that is a spot that I would have looked at and been like, not even a smart car could park there. And somehow he managed to do it. Again, like, thank you, Andrew, for driving everywhere. Otherwise, this trip literally would not have happened. And that one we did have to pay for, but I think it ended up only being like €5 or something for the couple of hours that we parked there. Once again, this was such an adorable town. I think they said they had like 11 or 14 of the medieval towers that were still preserved, which was crazy. The central piazza had this historical fountain there. And we ended up just grabbing a quick lunch at, I don't have the exact name of this place, but I believe it was the restaurant at this hotel called La Cisterna. And we just ordered pizza. Can I just say, this was the best pizza of the trip. It was so, so, so good. I literally like enjoyed and savored every single bite of this pizza while I was eating it. I was just such a happy camper. And once again, they had a lot of the same cute shops that the other towns had. I did also notice a perfume shop that I think I would have loved to like take some time and explore if I were by myself. And then we did end up getting some really good gelato here too. So that was excellent. Then it was finally time to make our way over to Siena. So for this one, we actually did have parking at the hotel. But again, we kind of pulled up to the front, dropped our bags off, had to explain to a cop that we were going to move our car in a second. We were just dropping our bags off. Thankfully, he understood. And then I waited with the bags while Andrew parked the car, and then we were able to check in. And this was probably my favorite hotel of the whole trip. It was called Palazzo Ravizza in Siena, and it was just so unbelievably beautiful. Breakfast was included. Our room was the biggest room that we had. The AC worked great. And their backyard terrace was the cherry on top of this whole thing. Just incredible, like, unobstructed views of the Tuscan landscape, just so ridiculously pretty. We also sat out there at sunset. They had a bar where you could like order drinks from too if you wanted, or you could also take your breakfast out there in the morning. Once I discovered that this was there, I was determined to spend as much time as possible just like sitting there and soaking it all in. I think we just grabbed a quick dinner Tuesday night, and then Wednesday was a full day planned to be in Siena. So the first thing that we did was Torre di Mangia, which is the clock tower in Siena that you can actually climb. This opens at 10 a.m. I would highly suggest getting there right when it opens. Again, I think a lot of tour groups or people that come in during the day will probably get there at like 10:30 or 11. This gives you the chance to be first in line. And also, it was hot while we were there. It was not as unbearably hot as Florence was the 2 days that we were there, but it was still really warm. So to do the climb first thing in the morning, I think was the right call. From up there, you just get these crazy panoramic views of the city of Siena. It is so beautiful. I did post a reel from the top of the tower, so I will leave that linked in the show notes if you want to see the view from the top. And then one request that I had for this trip was for us to take a cooking class. So that was what we did for lunch. We found a 1 p.m. class that we were able to walk to, and we went to a restaurant called Fonte Gusta. I think that's how you say it. It's spelled Giusta. And I can link the exact cooking class we did in the show notes. This was so much fun. So it was basically us and a bunch of other tourists, some people from the UK, some people from like California and places like that. So the class was taught in English, and we learned how to make 3 different types of pasta and tiramisu. I was maybe the teeniest bit disappointed because, and again, this is kind of hard because I imagine teaching this cooking class, it's really hard to like get tiramisu right on the first try. So they kind of like pre-made part of the tiramisu for us, and then we kind of filled in the blanks. I would have loved to actually learn from scratch how to do it, but they did email us the recipes afterwards. So I think I can maybe find some time to try here on my own. But the fact that we made all of our pasta, I was so impressed by. And it was just such a fun experience. We, learned how to do the dough, and I had the little pasta maker and stuff. Definitely something I hope to continue doing here at home. And then we were able to eat it all, and they served us wine and everything. It was honestly so, so good. And then on Thursday, we ended up booking a wine tour of the Chianti region. So the Chianti region is basically a little demarcated area on the map between Siena and Florence where they specifically produce Chianti Classico wine. And we actually learned about all of the different certifications and rules that you have to follow to produce Chianti Classico. If you are looking for it in the store, you want to look for the black rooster on the label. That is like proof that it's coming from that region specifically. That's where they can make Chianti Classico. I guess it's kind of like getting champagne from the Champagne area in France versus just champagne from anywhere. And we booked this tour. Again, I can leave the exact tour that we did in the show notes if you're interested, but it was cool because it was pitched as like small tour of wineries and castles in Chianti. And I was like, excellent, wine and history together, like say less, I'm there. And it really did end up being a small group. It was actually just Andrew and I, and then one other couple. They were from Brazil, did not get their names. It was one of those situations where it was like, you're my vacation friends today. And after this, I don't know a single thing about you. I don't know like where to find you. I don't know what your names are, but like we were friends for one day. And our tour guide, her name was Juliana, and she was so knowledgeable about the area. She was talking again about like all the different certifications of like for Chianti Classico, what percentage of the grapes actually need to be grown from specific vineyards, and then how there's a different category of wine if you want to be more experimental. And we ended up doing 3 tastings. The first one we went to was at a castle property that I got the sense was very popular in the area. However, my favorite winery of the day was, I'm absolutely about to butcher all of this, but bear with me. Azienda Agricola Casanova di Brecciano Gaiole in Chianti. So this fulfilled a vision, a very specific vision that I had for this trip, which was basically like, what would it be like to essentially go to a beautiful private backyard and have a family cook for you and like do a wine tasting? And that's exactly what we experienced at this family owned vineyard. I believe this tour was one of the more expensive things that we booked, but it was so worth it, not only for the tastings at 3 different wineries and the transportation from Siena to Chianti and back, of course, but for this meal alone, I feel like I would have paid that price. And you want to know what the meal was? Beautiful aperitivo board with meats, prosciutto melone, all these different cheeses, fresh berries. Oh my God, so good. And then a bunch of different breads with different olive oils, and then a pasta course. It was honestly just so, so good. And we got to try, I think, 3 or 4 different wines while we were doing our meal. I will say once again, not here for the dessert wines, not here for the limoncello. I know that this is something that Italians like to incorporate into their meals, and I did try everything, but at least I know for myself what I actually like. And honestly, once again, we were pretty full from this, so we ended up just grabbing pizza when we got back at a very grab and go type spot in Siena, which was nice. And then Friday was our last morning in Siena, so I sat outside and was reading my book. I was reading Main Characters by Hannah Ornstein. That's the book that came with me to Italy, which was fun, while Andrew went out for a run. And then we checked out from our hotel and we drove to Florence, which was our final destination. So Florence is where we dropped off our rental car. Obviously, if we had flown in from Rome and still needed to drive back to Rome, we could have kept the car and then driven back that way. But because we were in Florence and we were flying out of Florence, we were able to just drop the car off early because then we didn't need to pay for parking or worry about it at that point. We dropped the car off and then we were able to go to the train station, which was nearby, and get a taxi to our hotel. We stayed at the Borghese Palace Art Hotel. When we got there, our room wasn't ready. We were about 2 hours early to check in, but they were able to store our bags for us, and we took it as an opportunity to walk over to All'Antico Vinaio, which is this incredible sandwich shop that actually originated in Florence. So we got to go to the original location, and that they do have in the city here now. So if I'm ever feeling Italy sick, I can obviously always go and pick up a sandwich from them. Love that for me. And I forget the name of the sandwich that I got, but basically it was prosciutto, mozzarella, tomato, basil. And if at this point you're like, hey, you've eaten a lot of prosciutto on this trip, You're not wrong. I really have. And then it actually was so hot the 2 days we were in Florence. It got to 96 on Friday and then actually 97 on Saturday. So because it was so hot, I was immediately like, let's just pivot and do as many museums as we possibly can. So I unfortunately didn't get to do a ton of shopping because honestly, the popping in and out of stores, most of which were not air conditioned, was just not going to be the best way to spend that time and to wear myself out. So we went to the Uffizi Gallery. I got to show Andrew the two Botticelli paintings that I love, The Birth of Venus and Primavera, among many other incredible works of art that were there. And you know what I will say about Italian museums that I appreciate is they let you bring water in, which that is like a basic human right as far as I'm concerned. So maybe the New York museums can adopt that soon. You're allowed to bring in water as long as it's like small. So basically everything was within walking distance, which was great. We were able to get into our room. I will say this hotel, it was a little bit disorganized because we got in and we were doing something exciting the following morning. So Andrew was trying to look to see if they had an iron. We asked the front desk about it, and at first they said they were looking for it, and then they said they like couldn't find one, and then there was a whole thing about like there were some irons, but some other people had them, so we couldn't use them. And I don't know, it was kind of like giving false hope and then going back on it. So that was a little bit confusing. And then the other really annoying thing, like I said, of how hot it was that this was the first hotel where we had a mini fridge and it didn't work. Oh, you should have seen how crushed I was when I realized that. And I don't mean to complain, but after coming from the hotel in Siena, which was just like 5 stars across the board, I was a little bit like, what do you mean my mini fridge that's right here isn't working? And I did ask them to check on it. I didn't get any indication that they ever did. So the hotel itself was fine. Like it was clean, the breakfast was good, but it was just a little disorganized. And given how hot it was and how kind of stressed I was, it was just something that I noticed and that I will remember about the hotel. So that's just something to mention. But the air conditioning did work. So we cooled off in the room for a little bit. And then I had asked Andrew if he would come with me to one of the Florentine wine windows, which this is a tradition that dates back centuries. And it's so cool. Basically, you like tap a little bell and then the restaurateur behind the window asks you what you want. You tell them. I get the sense that every drink from one of these is 10 euros and that some people think that that's a ripoff. I live in the New York City area, guys. Nothing phases me. You want to charge me $23 for a cocktail? That's normal as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it's not normal, but like I'm just so used to it that I was like 10 euros for an Aperol Spritz. Take my money. Take my money. But I will say it was nice to see most wine was priced at maybe like 6 to 8 euros a glass at most restaurants. So I guess this was technically a little overpriced if you want to call it that. But for the experience, for doing it once, I was here for that. I decided to order an Aperol Spritz at the wine window though, because it came with ice and I was already a very sweaty gal. Typically for me, the idea of an Aperol Spritz is better than the reality, but this one really lived up to the hype. So I was very happy with this. And honestly, at this point, our dinners had been pretty casual and low key. Like I said, we've gotten pizza a couple times. We popped in and just got secondi at the one restaurant, and I said we should do like one big meal maybe tonight and not the night before we leave, because that's the night you're going to be tempted to do it, but at least then if you do it the day before you can like have wine and fill up and everything, and then you don't have to necessarily like recover or like digest that meal on an 8-hour plane the next day. So I had been reading about bistecca fiorentina, which is basically like a big T-bone steak that they cook, Florentine style, whatever that means. Whatever it was delicious. And I asked Andrew if he would want to do that with me. So we got bistecca fiorentina at a restaurant called Osteria del Pronoscolo. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. And Pronoscolo is actually the street that it was on as well, which makes sense. So we had that meal together. That was absolutely delicious. And we split a bottle of Chianti Classico with that. And we got some gelato because, again, it was like 90 degrees at sunset, which was really crazy. And then the next morning, earlier in this episode, I hinted that Andrew got in front of the camera. And that's because I booked us a little photo shoot in Florence. I used a website called Local Lens to get matched with a local photographer, and we booked a 30-minute photo session. So we got to take photos in front of the Ponte Vecchio, in front of the Uffizi Gallery, and also in front of the Duomo, which is probably the most iconic location in Florence. And I'm so happy with how the photos turned out. Also, I was only supposed to be able to pick 15, but she actually sent me over 30, which I think was nice. And I think she wanted to have some edited as well for her portfolio, but like she definitely over delivered, which I really appreciated. But it's kind of the same way that it works with photographers I work with here, where I got the gallery and I got to choose my selections. So I got all of the photos that I wanted, plus a couple of extras, which was really nice. I got a dress from Zara for this photo shoot. That was so cute. I saw Olivia Marcus wear it first, and she inspired me to get it. Honestly, I was planning to spend the rest of the day in that dress and just like frolic around Florence in it, but it was so hot that I ended up changing into this pair of linen shorts from Quince and just like the tiniest little black tank top that I owned. Then we walked up to Piazza Michelangelo for these like beautiful panoramic views of the city. Honestly, stunning. Definitely worth visiting if you're in Florence. We got another sandwich for lunch, this time from a shop called Pino's, which also had a little bit of the line, although not anywhere as bad as All'Antico Vinaio. And the sandwich that I got was literally just like ham, brie, and truffle oil, and it was amazing. Then we popped into the Galleria dell'Accademia. Why does that like not sound right when I say it out loud? Hopefully you know what I mean, to see Michelangelo's David. So that was really special. And then we actually ended the day by visiting the Salvatore Ferragamo Museum. And this is like, I think, the hidden gem of Florence. I absolutely loved this museum. It is located in the store, but like in the basement. And I learned so much. I did not realize Ferragamo had spent so much time originally in California. And then he became the go to shoe person for all of the big Hollywood actresses at the time. I had no idea that he secured, I think, over 300 different patents for his shoes, which, like, they display them. There's a patent room, which was honestly just overwhelming to walk through. Like, this was a man who knew fashion inside and out, and it was just so cool to see all of that. And I was actually like gushing to the girls at the front desk of the museum. I was like, I just want to say, I think this is so amazing, and I really learned a lot, and like I enjoyed this exhibition so much. And then on the last night we decided to get Mexican food, because at that point we were just like pasta'd out. Like there was not a carb left for us to eat that we didn't already consume. So we did actually cave and get Mexican. It was fine. It was, it was what you would expect a Mexican restaurant in Florence to taste like. And then coming home, oh my God. So our plane was delayed leaving in Florence, and Florence is a regional airport in Italy. So you can only connect to Florence from other European countries in the Schengen region. You can't like fly directly to Florence from the US. So we were able to get to the Florence airport with plenty of time to spare. We were like early for our flight, and it just kept getting pushed back like by little increments. It's one thing if your flight gets pushed back by a huge amount of time and you're like, oh, okay, I've missed my connection. It was just like little bits enough where you started to wonder like, okay, this means we only have like an hour and 20 minutes in Frankfurt instead of the hour and a half we thought we had. And then it's like, now it's more like an hour and 10 minutes. And then it like whittled all the way down to like, are we only going to have 20 minutes in Frankfurt from when our plane lands to when our other plane takes off? Our flight lands in Frankfurt, and I'm thinking it's not looking good for us. Like, I'm starting to try to look up on my phone as people are like getting their bags and waiting to get off the plane, like other flights from Frankfurt that day. Not as many as I was hoping there would be. For some reason in my head, I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if there was one like every 2 hours that just went to like, I don't know, Newark or JFK or whatever? Not really the case. It was basically like, if you miss this flight, that's really bad, actually. So we deplane and we get off the plane and we get on a bus. And I feel like whenever you get on a bus after being on a plane, it's either going to take you like 2 minutes to get to your gate, or it's going to take you just way longer than you ever expected it would. And that's when Andrew and I just started like fully laughing to ourselves at that point, because we got the full tour of the Frankfurt airport on this bus. I feel like we must have circled the whole thing like 3 times, or at least that's what it felt like while we were sitting on it. And I was like, okay, there's no way. Like, our flight is gone at this point. There's just no way that we've made it. But anyway, we get off finally. We are sprinting towards the Z gates, I guess, which was what we were aiming for. We're in line for the passport control. And then this like man comes by and he's like, Z gates, come with me. And we're like, that can't be real. But so we follow him anyway. And he brings us up to this different passport control area. And while we're in line for the passport control, someone was saying that they thought the Newark flight was delayed by 20 minutes, which would still give us like a very narrow window to make it, because at that point the plane was supposed to have left already. When I tell you, we were sprinting through this airport like Amazing Race style to the point where I was like, Andrew, I can't, Andrew's a marathon runner. Okay. So just for context, this man is already sprinting ahead. And I'm like, I don't know if I can keep running at this pace. Like, I have not run that hard and fast in my life, maybe ever. So I'm like, and he's like, give me your bag. So, like, and I want to give myself credit actually and back up for a minute to say that, like, when we were first checking in at Florence for our flight, I actually end up checking my carry-on bag because we had gotten an email from the airlines that said, like, your flight is full. We're looking for people to check their carry-ons. And I said, why don't I just do that? Because I feel like we're going to have a tight connection in Frankfurt anyway. And I feel like if I had not done that, we really would have missed the flight because then I would have been handling both a tote bag that was my like personal item and my carry-on roller bag. And going up the stairs and everything, like there just would have been no way. I'm so relieved that I did that, although that kind of ended up backfiring for a reason I'll get to in 1 second. But so Andrew then takes my tote bag. He sprints ahead like to the gate. Maybe at worst case, he can get there while it's like closing and beg them not to close it, even though I'm still probably like 2 or 3 minutes behind him, it feels like at this point. So we literally like run. We're sprinting for our lives up to the gate. And as we get to our flight, they're boarding group 2 and we're group 5. And I am so out of breath. I'm so sweaty. Like my first nightmare was missing the flight. My second nightmare was needing to sit in my own sweat for 8 hours flying from Frankfurt back to Newark. But that is okay because you know what? We made it on the plane. I've never been so grateful in my entire life. Now, the only thing to note is here's where checking the bags backfired. The bags did not make the flight. I think that's probably something you could assume given the fact that we narrowly made it ourselves. So thank God for AirTags. I checked as soon as we landed and I was like, there's my suitcase and my carry-on just chilling in Terminal 1 at the Frankfurt airport. And to the credit of our airline, I think we originally booked this flight through United, and then I think they like offset us to some of their other partners. So the flight back was technically Lufthansa Airlines. To their credit, Andrew had a text like right when we landed that was like, we've found your baggage. Like, please fill this out so we can get it delivered to you. And our baggage was able to go on the flight the following day, same flight that we were on from Frankfurt to Newark. And our bags actually got delivered later that night. So we got home Sunday afternoon and we had our bags Monday night. But I feel like that was good practice if we do ever go on the Amazing Race, which, if you don't know, is like a dream of mine and also Andrew's, because I think we've watched like about 20 or so seasons of the show together at this point, and I just absolutely love it. Although that sprinting through the airport was quite interesting. And I'm so happy to be back. I'm so happy we went. So grateful for this trip. And I'm also just so grateful, like I said, today was off to a bit of a rough start for me, but honestly, just sitting here talking to you guys, I do feel so much better. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Hopefully you enjoyed this little catch up, and feel free to reply like on my personal socials or the podcast accounts. Tell me what's going on with you. Do you have summer travel coming up? Have you been to Italy? Have you had a crazy airport story that you feel like I would appreciate? Send me a voice note. Say hi. Please keep the conversation going 2 ways because at this point, I've already been talking for way too long. So let me let you go, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.